Hey everybody, welcome back to It's a Nice Song, but It's Hard to Sing Lenten series. This is our third installment, and today we are going to be talking about the story where we get that soundbite, give to Caesar what is Caesar's and to God what is God's. It is a line that gets misappropriated and misused and used for other people's purposes, so let's talk a little bit more about where it came from. So in this story today, these Pharisees, and the scriptures tell us they're Herodian Pharisees, which means they are loyal to the Roman Empire. This is a time in which the Jewish people are under the occupation of the Romans. And while most of the Jewish people are resentful and don't want to be under the occupation of the Romans and do everything they can to resist that occupation, the Herodians are the go-along, get-along people. They're the people of the mindset that cooperation with the Roman Empire is a much better way to live their lives than to try to resist these occupying forces. So, the Herodians are not very well liked by the rest of the Jewish population, as you can imagine. And these were Pharisees who were also Herodians, and they come to Jesus and they've got a trick question. The question is it right that we should give taxes to the empire, that we should pay taxes to the emperor? And of course, this is a loaded question. If Jesus says, yes, absolutely, we should be paying taxes, then he is going to lose all street cred from his followers, who are most likely all people who are part of that #resist movement. They are not Herodians. They are not go along and get along. They resent being under occupation of the Romans. And so he can't say, yes, we should. However, if he says no, he could be accused of treason and insurrection and be jailed. So there is no good answer to this question. The Pharisees know this, but Jesus also knows this, and he calls them on it. He said, you're doing this on purpose. You know there's not a good answer, but give me a coin. And so they don't know what to do. They're probably a little ticked that their ruse has not worked, but they hand him a coin. And in those days, the image of Caesar was embedded on the coin, was stamped on the coin. Now, I know we have images of people stamped on our coins. We've got George Washington, Abe Lincoln. But in those days, an image connotated ownership. So the understanding was that when Caesar's image was stamped on these coins, those coins belonged to Caesar. And you were really just paying back to Caesar what was already his. And the way that the Romans, the Herodians, like to spin it was that this was money you were paying for the protection of the Roman Empire. All of the benefits you get because Rome has now taken you over, you owe these taxes. This money that is already Caesar's goes back to Caesar. And of course, these other folks who consider it an occupation, occupying forces rather than protective forces, are against these things. But Caesar's image is on this. So the understanding is that the coin belongs to Caesar. And so Jesus just says, who is this on the coin? And they all say, well, it's Caesar. And Jesus says, so give to Caesar what is Caesar's and give to God what is God's. I don't think this necessarily means that Jesus is pro-tax. I think the most important part is what he says after that. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's and give to God what is God's. So if the image, having the image on something connotates ownership and belonging, if the coin belongs to Caesar because it has Caesar's image on it, whose image do we have? And I think that's what Jesus is trying to say, that we bear the image of God. And so when we give to Caesar what is Caesar's, we're just handing over money. But when we give to God what is God's, we are giving our whole selves. And I like to believe what Jesus is saying here is don't worry so much about these coins with Caesar's image on them and where they're going, because life is fleeting and we only have so much control about what our money does after it leaves our hands. That's why throughout the Gospels, Jesus really tries to get us to hold on loosely or to completely give away the possessions that we have, because those things are fleeting. They're not really what's important. But he says, give to God what is God's. Meaning you are God's. And so give your whole self to God. And that's what you should be doing with your life, not quibbling over who gets these coins, but making sure that you yourself are giving your whole self and your whole life to God. After all, you already belong to God. You were created in God's image. God's image is stamped up on you. So in giving your whole self to God, you are only giving back what already belongs to God. And doing that is a whole lot harder than quibbling over where our taxes go. We can argue about taxes all day long, and you can make good points, and I can make good points, and we can leave never in agreement and having enjoyed a good, healthy, honest debate. But in thinking about how we give our whole selves back to God, how we devote our whole lives to God, that is a whole lot harder. So in the midst of all that is happening, go forth this week and thinking about how you can give your whole self to God. In the midst of a world that is not necessarily under occupation, but is certainly in the midst of some great turmoil, with lots of people choosing to deal with it in different ways. Go forth into this week knowing that you have God's image stamped upon you, that you belong to God, and that your goal in life is to give your whole self back to God. And how can you do this in the midst of a world that is fearful and frightened? Go forth into this week as people of God and be especially kind to everyone you meet.